in so many of these grief groups that I've been to, everyone starts talking about the aching and loss and the pain, and then very quickly the conversation shifts to how they've been abandoned by their friends and family. Every time.
Really?
Every
Really?
time. Yep. And there's so much bitterness and anger and confusion, and it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking because I feel like it's just a cultural miscommunication. That people want to help people in loss, but we've got these like expectations that, everybody grieves in their own way, so let's leave them alone to figure it out for themselves, as opposed to we grieve in community, and death makes people feel very lonely, and let's reach out and be with them in these moments, as opposed to walking away from people in grief.
I'd like to welcome to the show Colin Campbell. How you doing, Colin?
Good. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much for coming on the show, my friend. I truly appreciate it. I'm looking forward to talking about your amazing book, Finding the Words. That is it is undescribable what's going on in this book. It has so many different it's an emotional roller coaster, to say the least. So for before we get started, I want to ask you, what was your life like prior to the loss of Ruby and Hart?
So I'm in Los Angeles, and I'd been an indie film director, just doing some indie features and shorts, and mostly actually acting as a professor. So I teach screenwriting at Chapman University and
Nice.
theater directing at Cal Poly Pomona. And then I was a dad. I was mostly a dad. That's really kind of how I thought of myself. And that was what my life was. Ruby was 17, Hart was 14. So there was a lot of like taking them to after school activities or hangouts with friends. We'd go on family outings together.
We're basically chauffeurs.
Yes, exactly.
Like chauffeurs. So tell me about, for everybody who doesn't know what we're talking about, who Ruby and Hart are, they are your children that passed in an accident. Can you talk a little bit about what happened and what you would like to share about that?
Yeah. So I actually prefer to refer to it as a crash rather than an accident.
Okay.
Because, to my mind, the woman who hit us, she was drunk and high, and it wasn't accidental that she got drunk and high, and then she wasn't accidental that she got behind the wheel.
Right.
She knew better, right? We all know better, but she did it anyway. So I prefer to call it a crash. And that night, June 12th, we were on our way to Joshua Tree. For those of you who don't know, it's a little town in the high desert, about 2.5 hours east of Los Angeles. Sweet, beautiful place that the four of us loved. We'd gone there many, many times. And we were going there for another little adventure. It was kind of spontaneous. We all piled into the car, and that night was very, very exciting. And we just purchased a vacation home out there. It was like brand new. We just said yes to it, kind of again spontaneously. And then, out of the blue, we were struck by this car going 90 miles an hour, and Ruby and Hart were killed in the back seat. And my wife Gail and I were hurt, so we went to the hospital, but Ruby and Hart were killed.
So let me ask you then, how did you? I mean, did you when you heard this information, did you know at the scene, or did you hear about it later?
Well, it's a strange thing. So I think we subconsciously knew in that moment. So we were both knocked unconscious. So we came to in the wreckage of a car. The other driver's car was like 100 feet down the road on fire, and in the back seat, Ruby and Hart were motionless. And I don't want to get too graphic, but
Sure.
that it didn't look good. So people came and helped, and there was a lot of CPR given by very diligent emergency response people, EMTs. That's the word I'm looking for. And then they were whisked off to the hospital. And then, in fact, Hart was from one hospital. He was put on a helicopter and sent to a PICU unit, a pediatric intensive care unit, even further off. but they died from multiple life-ending injuries, so there was really no hope for them, and they never really breathed again. So to my mind, they died on impact. Yeah.
So as this happened, how did you? I mean, first of all, man, I'm a father as well, so I can't even
Yeah.
comprehend the grief that
Yeah.
you and your wife went through. How did you begin to even find the strength to navigate this immense loss
Mhm.
in your life?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I say that I grew up in a family that was grief averse. So I feel like my family, we didn't really deal with grief too well or too thoroughly. We kind of just sort of put it aside in a way. Uh, and here it was a case where we couldn't do that. It's too catastrophic to just put aside. I had to my whole family had to confront this loss. And I actually leaned on my wife's Jewish traditions. So I'm not Jewish, but my wife is Jewish, and we raised Ruby and Hart as Jews. They were bar and bat mitzvahed. We were active members of our temple, and uh, and and our temple was extraordinarily supportive of us in this moment. They really came together and helped us. But specifically, the Jewish rituals of mourning were eye-opening to me. So
Hmm.
I'm an atheist, so it was never about God. It was all about the practicality of how do you grieve? How do you, as you said, process this immense sudden loss? And so many of these ancient practices of the Jews really resonated with me. Like they made sense. Like, oh, this makes sense. This helps me. Thank you. And one of the core elements is the idea that we don't grieve alone. We grieve in community. So right after the funeral, there's 7 nights of Shiva, or at least the first
Hmm.
week, and
Right.
people come to your house every night and
Oh,
sit with you.
right.
So we had like 150 people coming into our house and sitting with us every night, night after night. And I found it was so helpful. At first, it was like, no, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's the last thing you want, you think, right? You
Right.
want to be
Right.
left alone. You're not going to, people come into your house. No. But actually, it was an amazing gift because I discovered, and Gail and I both discovered, we needed to talk about Ruby and Hart and our grief just to process it, just to understand it, to not lose our minds. And it was so helpful to have this community of loving people there each night. And the other thing that the Jewish tradition asks you to do is to say the mourner's Kaddish, which is just a mourner's prayer every day. But the trick is you can't do it alone. You have to do it with at least 9 other people with you, a minyan. And
Right.
so that asks us, the mourners, to literally grieve in public over and over and over again. And it
Right.
was so powerful and helpful, that idea. You don't go away in a corner all by yourself and just be sad and despondent, but you grieve in public. And it was very powerful.
That sounds so. Um, I hate to use the word wonderful, but it seems so helpful.
Yeah.
Because even when I grieved, when I had loss in my family, just normal family members lose, like we all do in life. I come from the
Yeah.
Latino tradition, and we have the one night, and we
Hmm.
go to dinner. We have a wake. We go to the person's house, and God bless and good luck.
Right. Right. Yeah. Good luck.
I wish you the best with that, and maybe a few phone calls here and there. But I think when we do grieve, our first reaction, like you said, is to recoil
Hmm.
into a corner, and so you can literally, I think, almost self-destruct because your mind is going to destroy you. Was that kind of what you were thinking was going to happen if it wasn't for all of this help?
Yeah. Well, I felt really untethered was the word I used
Yes,
a lot. I
great
feel
word to use.
untethered, um, just disconnected from meaning and purpose, from life, uh, from my own identity. Like, who am I without Ruby and Hart?
Right.
And so I felt, yeah, just like drifting away into or falling into a chasm was another sort of image that came to mind. Like we're just falling into a chasm of darkness, and I didn't want to. I didn't want to fall into that chasm, and so that helped me. Yeah.
I have to imagine that there was an immense amount of anger and rage during
Hmm.
this process. How did
Yes.
you even begin to deal with that?
Yeah, it's so interesting, anger and rage. It's so mysterious to me in a way, because on the one hand, it makes perfect sense. I'll be very angry at this woman who killed my children, who got drunk and high and then was speeding, going 90 miles an hour in a 50-mile-an-hour zone, right near her own home. So it's not like she didn't know the speed limit, didn't even know where she was going. Uh, but that's not really how it came out. It came out more just at the universe, just
Right.
this bubbling rage at like the unfairness of it all. It just felt
Mhm.
so. It still feels so unfair. And I'm not so good with anger. I don't know if anybody's good with it, but I definitely feel scared of anger. I think in my regular life before my grief, I just sort of would often avoid situations, or I'd make jokes, to avoid the anger. That's not. I didn't really know how to handle my own feelings of anger, and I certainly still don't. But I think my wife and I found a couple of tools that helped us.
Yeah.
And the one tool that remains helpful to me is this idea of kindness. Kindness as an antidote to rage. And the idea that if I start to feel that anger bubbling up in me, if I can act kindly to some stranger, even, that helps me. It helps diffuse the rage. Um, and that's been a tool that's a constant for me in dealing with the anger, but also expressing myself. Like I wrote a very angry solo show called Grief, a One Man Shit Show, which I performed a bunch of times in LA and New York, and I'm going to keep performing it. Um, and that helps. That helps me too.
Well, as an artist, you get to use your artistic abilities as an outlet to process this. Some
Hmm.
people paint, some
Yeah.
people write. I mean, some of the best songs ever, some of the best books ever
Right.
were written out of grief and anger and loss. So it
Yeah.
is. Do you have any advice for people who are dealing in this at this stage, at least, of your process, that they
Yeah.
can kind of funnel this somehow?
Yeah. I think that's a great approach to it. We have all this bubbling emotion, and where does it go? And if it can come out creatively, I think that diffuses it, and channels it away from your friends and family, because
Mhm.
that's where it often unfortunately goes. You start feeling rageful towards the people who are closest to you, because they're close to you,
Almost.
they're around you. Who
Right.
else you can be angry at? The people around you, but those are the people that love you. Um, and so yeah, I think even I guess my advice would be that don't think that it has to be great art.
Just
You
art,
know
just
what I
get it
mean?
out.
Yeah, like you said, like some of the greatest songs ever written, and it's like, well, that's not, it could be daunting too. Like, oh, I'm not going to write a great song. But just write a crappy song about rage. Yeah, don't worry about it. That's my advice.
Exactly. Um, Now, did you also go through what are those seven stages of what are
Oh,
they called? You know what they are,
uh,
right?
yes, yeah, yeah. So that's not actually how grief works.
Okay, tell me how
Um, yeah,
from your on the ground
yes, yeah, yeah.
in the trenches kind of
Yeah,
perspective.
and it's not just me. I mean, if you read any contemporary book about grief, or talk to anyone who knows what they're talking about, you don't move through stages. And so, if you want to get technical, those stages were developed by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross when she was studying people who were end of life. So they were in hospice care, facing imminent death, and it seemed to her that they went through these stages in this order. Um, but it was a useful tool for her to break down what these people were going through. And then she and David Kessler kind of applied it to people who were grieving in another. So the first book was on death and dying, and then on
Mhm.
grief and grieving was where they applied it to people who were grieving people who died. But they say in that book very clearly, it's not meant to be interpreted as a stage you go through, and that they're distinct. You're not angry and then you're done with anger, then you move on to
Right.
to, bargaining, and then you move
Denial.
on to denial. Like, that's not how it works. But because they use the word stages, I think the popular culture has sort of gravitated to that idea that you do one at a time. But no, you experience all those feelings all at the same time, multiple times a day, and they don't go away. So yeah.
So let me ask you, you said earlier that you were an atheist. After this
Mhm.
experience and all this tradition from the Jewish tradition, have
Yeah.
you changed at all in the sense of just the scope of the universe? And even if even if there is a God, being angry at him, it's fine. It's just like,
Right.
is there some, have you changed at all? And if you haven't, that's fine. I'm just curious.
Yeah, yeah. I think maybe my ideas have gotten a little more expansive in the sense that I feel Ruby and Hart in me. You know
Mm,
what I mean? Like, I feel them. They helped shape who I am, uh, to a remarkable degree, and so they're with me in that sense.
mm.
And I like to think about them now and again, like looking down on me. But I don't believe in a heaven or some God character who's making choices.
Right.
No, I don't. They're like, God needed two more angels. Nope. No, someone got drunk and high and killed my kids. That's what happened.
Right.
But I know that faith helps other people, and that's great. I think any help you can get when you're grieving is wonderful. So I don't want to put down anybody who does believe in heaven. That's wonderful for them. Honestly, any way that we can get through grief is great, or move through grief. But for me, yeah, no, I don't believe any of that better place stuff.
Can you tell me a little bit about Ruby and Hart?
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for asking. um, I know everybody says their own kids are wonderful, but my kids actually were, they were amazing. Um, but Ruby was this incredibly talented artist. She was brilliant. She was a voracious reader. And she and I would go see horror movies together, and then she would go and read the books. So we sort of let the right one in. I think it's a Swedish horror film, and then she
Yeah.
found the book that it's based on, and she read that book. We watched Stephen King's It, and
Well,
she
yes.
read it. It's just a massive tome. She just burned through books. She read literally twice as fast as I could read, and she was voracious about it. So she was this brilliant mind. But then she discovered art very late in life, and late in her life, and just was brilliant. And so I have these drawings. I have tattoos of her art, so I can show right now real quick. But
Oh, that's
it's
amazing.
called like
Oh,
a
that's
koi
beautiful.
wolf. Yeah, so she
Yeah.
did these two wolves, um, that I just love. So I got them tattooed on me.
Oh,
But
that's beautiful.
she did these wolves as if they were koi fish. So they used koi fish color patterns and gave them koi fish whiskers. Just 'cause she was a
It's
strange
art. It's art.
art. Yeah, yeah, she was into it, and she was also an amazing costume designer. So she did her own cosplay outfits for anime conventions. She loved anime and manga, and read the manga voraciously as well. And Hart was an amazing clown. He was this hilarious dude who just would do characters nonstop, all day long. And so his friends were just endlessly charmed by him. He was an extraordinarily charming guy who just was the life of any party he was at. I remember going to one of his friends' house to pick him up, after a sleepover or something, and they all conspired to hide Hart from me, so that, like, because they wanted to keep him. Hart's not here. I'm sorry, we can't find him. I was like, come on,
That's
guys,
problematic.
no,
That's problematic.
we're not going to give him up. But that's how it was. Everybody wanted to be with Hart.
That's
Yeah, they were
beautiful,
they were
man.
both very magnetic human beings and very kind, and that continues to inspire me. So when I think about that, kindness is an antidote to rage. I feel inspired by them.
That is such a beautiful idea, that kindness is the antidote to rage and anger, because I mean, at the end of the day, it is about love, all forms of love. And if you could show that
Yeah,
love to others, it kind of douses the flame of anger a bit, right?
yeah, I think so. Yeah,
Now,
yeah.
did you ever encounter any unexpected obstacles while working through your grief?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Unexpected obstacles. Well, I mean, it's just so much harder than I
Than
would
even
ever have
imagine.
imagined. Yeah,
Right.
yeah. It's so painful. Um, but that's where I discovered I had to go. I had to lean into the pain. So so it's so painful to see my friends with their kids all, Heart's contemporaries are all graduating this year to they're graduating high school, going
Right.
to college, and all of Ruby's friends are now going into what senior year of college, unless they took a year off, because of COVID or whatnot. But they're all in college. They're all becoming adults, and it's beautiful, and it's so very painful. It just
Yeah.
hurts so bad. And everything hurts so bad. They're everywhere. Everywhere I look, I see Ruby and Hart because they were here in my home, and everywhere I go and out in the world, they were there too, or they weren't there. And I think about that. If I go to a new place they've never been, that also feels hard. Ruby and Hart never got to see this. You know,
And that's never going to change ever. I mean, but
no,
what I find so amazing about you, Colin, is that your bravery to not only, we all go through griefs. Not obviously nothing as extreme as yours, but we all go through our own griefs. We're all going to have loss in this life. That's it. Like they
yeah,
say, you're never getting out of this alive, uh, as they
right,
say. So do you find that because you put yourself out there, I mean, you could have processed this and said,
yeah,
okay, kept it private, move on with life, and try to go through life, but you wrote a book, did a show, you're still having these conversations, which I can't believe
mm,
were not difficult to do. I mean, bringing
mm,
this all back up, having these deep conversations, remembering you. Why do you decide to go down this path as opposed to what other people, most people, I would say, the majority of people
mm,
would just go deal with the process it and move on in life?
yeah, yeah. Well, I think maybe there's two thoughts come to mind. One is it was a very central part of my discovery of meaning and purpose. So life felt meaningless without Ruby and Hart, and I would go to all these grief groups and hear stories about other grievers feeling alone and abandoned by their friends and family. And I feel like Gail and I found a way to keep friends and family close. And I thought I had something to share that might help people. And that helped me, the idea I might be of service to some other people. People I suddenly care greatly about, people who are in grief, suddenly became a lot more important to me
Mhm.
as humans. And as part of my post traumatic growth. And so I definitely felt that helped me just staying alive. I had a reason to do something. And the other part of it, I think, is again leaning into the grief of it all, to feel the love and joy, to remember Ruby and Hart, to think about them. It hurts, but it's also good, because the alternative just seems too bleak, to just put them away in a box and not
Right.
think about them. Um, so I try to find ways to bring them with me through life. So I'm here in life, and I'm staying engaged. My wife and I are fostering to adopt two kids.
That's
So
beautiful.
they're 13 and 12, and they're
Oh,
full of teen issues. So it's very challenging. It's very challenging.
yeah.
Um, but that's who Gail and I want to spend time with. We want to spend time with teenagers. Um, so we've chosen a very difficult path, um, but and it's painful because we're thinking about Ruby and Hart all the time as we're parenting, because that's who we parented before. But I think that uh, I think that feel everything. Like there's a quote I take in the book, from Rilke about let yourself feel everything. And that's what we're here on Earth for a short time, and let's feel the pain and the joy, and they're intertwined anyway.
Very much. Oh God, very much so. So when you say meaning and purpose, this event that happened in your life are you using meaning and purpose as a way to cope, or do you believe that this was in a way kind of gave you, because you had a very successful career, you were moving forward. I mean, it's not like you were sitting around, not doing anything.
Right, right. I don't mean purpose in like a large. Well, I don't know what I mean by purpose. I do know what I mean. I mean like uh, combating meaninglessness.
Okay.
So finding my meaning and purpose is like just staying engaged in life and not giving up on life, not giving into despair. Yeah,
Wow.
I think despair can seize people in grief. I think it does inevitably, and we all have to find our way out of it, out of that despair.
What I find really interesting about your process and what you're doing is that you are, a lot of people, when we go through grief, we do hide in a dark room,
Hmm.
and we do put it in a box, and we don't deal with it. Where you are dealing with it every day, bringing it
Yeah.
into the light every day, and it is painful, and but it is less painful than if you just try to put it away or try to not shine light on the situation. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I think that's exactly true. I think that's the irony of it all is that I think people who try to box it away and not deal with it are actually going to feel more pain, more suffering ultimately. Um, it's a sort of short-term, long-term situation, I guess. Nobody in the immediate moment actually wants to feel the pain, but if we don't let ourselves, then over time, I think it leads to more suffering. Yeah.
Was there something that you wish someone would have done for you during the worst part of this grieving process?
Yeah, I think I got a lot of people reaching out to me. A lot. We had a beautiful community, and Gail and I found ways very quickly to tell them what we needed. And we got so much love. We still get so much love all the time. Father's Day is a tough day, complicated day for me, and I got
Yeah.
so many messages of love and support from so many different people who are thinking about me. Um, but I still want more. You know, I think that even though I got so much, I get so much love. Um, I could always have used, certainly in the darkest of days, used more. I think we all can. I've never been to a grief group where someone has said, I get too much love and support from people. You know what I mean? I've never heard that. So, I've never heard someone say, there's so many people who want to talk about my dead loved one that it just is tiring. I've never heard that. So,
it's
yeah,
it's
I
it,
think we could all use more.
it's kind of like, as being filmmakers, you never hear the term, all you have is time and money. Like, you never
Right.
as much time as you need and as much cash as you want. You'll
Right.
never hear that statement anywhere on this
Right.
planet.
No, no. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So were there any tools that you discovered along your way to help you deal with grief, besides some of the things we've already discussed?
Yeah. Well, grief groups, I sort of alluded to it, but that was a very useful tool. And those people in those grief groups are still friends of mine, and that helps me immensely. Um, Journaling was very useful to me. I journaled every day for the first year after the crash, and so in my book, I offer a lot of journal prompts in case someone feels stuck. Um, but that was helpful to me just to sort of my journal entries, I think, were not very interesting. They're just sort of spouting out my thoughts, and sometimes I just swear a lot, you know.
Right.
But it helped me. It helped me to just understand what was happening, I guess, or just to process it, start to understand it. And rituals were hugely helpful to me. They still are. Every time there's a holiday comes up, Father's Day, the day of their deaths, the day of their births, um, Valentine's Day, they all pose a real problem for me and my wife. How are we going to get through this holiday? And we often lean on rituals, doing something, sometimes inviting people in our community to do it with us, but some kind of activity that keeps us engaged with others in the world, and thinking about Rumi and Hart, as opposed to just retreating and suffering. which is what it feels like. Oh boy, here comes, what are we going to do this year, the day of their deaths? It's going to be so horrible. And this year, what we did is we started our foundation for Ruby and Hart called the Ruby and Hart Foundation. And we're raising money to send to support this organization called WAAC, which sends writers to underserved schools across America to read aloud to kids and then give them all free books.
Oh, that's
So
amazing.
yeah, Ruby and Hart loved reading. And we have these little book plates made. I don't have one right in front of me to show you, but it's
Sure.
super, super cute. And it's called, this book belongs to, and there's a blank for the kid to write their name in it. And then it's a gift from Ruby and Hart. And the idea that the books all across America with little stickers, from Ruby and Hart to kids to help them have access to reading, which is so key, is really beautiful and meaningful for my wife and I. We're both writers, so.
The one thing you said about the journaling, I find that it seems at least when I've gone through whatever things I've gone through in life, it's like this energy inside of you just starts to build up, and it boils up, and it could get to anger, it could be sadness, it could be despair, but it's energy. There's some sort of, without getting too woo-woo, something is happening inside of us.
Yeah.
And if you do not release it, like you said, you'll snap at people near you. Journaling seems, like you said, I just curse sometimes. I journaled too, and I was just like, you son of a bitch, and I just would literally spew out, because if I don't, it would be kind of like a toxic. I'm releasing the toxins in a way. Is that fair?
That's what it felt like to me. Exactly right. I felt like things would build up, and I'd have to just it's like vomiting almost. I had to get it out. And sometimes it was just like I had to weep. Like I wouldn't be crying for a couple of days and then build up, and I just have to have a session of weeping. And then also the anger and frustration, and I had to have a session of writing, just get it out. Yeah.
And we all don't have to be, and all of us don't have to be artists to do so. I mean, journaling is a perfect example. A good cry, man, I can tell you, a good cry can really help. It's amazing what a good cry can do sometimes.
Yeah. Just feeling those feelings and not being too afraid of them, because they're scary sometimes, those feelings.
So from your point of view now of being the person that people helped, what advice do you have for the people around someone who is grieving? What should they do? What advice do you have? Because it is not taught in school. It is not something that generally is on Netflix. It is not a skill set that, and then there's cultural biases, community biases, historical, but there's so many different things. It's not a one size fits all. So what advice would you give for people who are trying to help someone in a grieving process?
Yeah. Well, I have lots of advice.
Please.
One is that, I think take the pressure off what you're going to say to them, because the goal is not to fix them or fix their grief or take away their pain, because you can't. The person's dead. You can't bring them back to life. So any time that someone tries to help somebody with that mindset, they're inadvertently minimizing the pain, because they're trying to take it away. They're trying to reassure the person, don't feel too bad, because, and then that's bad. That's going to invariably piss this person off, because you're saying things that are kind of insulting or minimize. Don't worry, you could have another kid, right? You could marry somebody else. Literally, these are people hear these things. I didn't, but I know grievers who have. Sure. Especially people who lose very young children. That's a classic. Someone says, "Oh, you can have another kid. Don't worry about it."
They're just trying to help.
Married. They're trying to help. Right. But no, don't try and fix the pain or take away the pain. Just be there for the person. Just say you love them and you love the person who died, if you knew them, and share a story about the person who died, but mostly be there for that person to talk to you. I want to go for a walk with you and talk and hear and listen to what you have to say. I think that's the greatest gift you can give a griever, because they feel so alone. Loneliness is such a powerful part of grief. It's so overwhelming, because before Ruby and Hart died, I had lots of friends and family that mattered to me. But when Ruby and Hart were killed, nobody else mattered. It was just Ruby and Hart, and they were gone. So I felt alone. You know what I mean? It logically doesn't make sense, but emotionally, that's how it felt. The only people who mattered to me were Ruby and Hart, and they were gone. So I was alone. And I think that's shared by many people who've lost loved ones. In that acute grief period, they feel so alone, and being there for them is so helpful. And oftentimes in early grief, people don't want to be with people. They want to be alone. They think they want to be alone, right? They like I said, I don't want people to come into my house for Shiva. No. But I said, okay, because I don't know any better. I'll do whatever the Jews tell me to do, basically, and it worked. You know, I was like, whatever my rabbi tells me, I'm going to do that, and it helped a lot. She's also a very wise rabbi, but still. And so I think oftentimes people in early grief, they push away help, and so the friends and family are like, oh, I guess they want to be left alone forever. And it's no, not forever. Just that day. Reach out again. Keep reaching out, because it will change, and they will desperately want to be with people at some point.
And you said you've said this a couple times in our conversation, the stories. How important is it for you as the griever to hear stories about what not caused you the grief, but reminds you of the grief? Because this is a weird tightrope to say, like, when's the right time?
Right.
When should we do it? When is it really helpful? When is it just like rubbing salt on the wound? This is really kind of a really tightrope thing. So what advice do you have for that?
Yeah, well, I have a kind of not radical, but I have a forceful opinion about that,
Okay.
which is I know that there are some people out there who don't want to talk about the person who died. I know that those people exist.
Sure.
But I also know that they're a very tiny minority. I know that the overwhelming amount of people who've lost someone want to talk about that person. And so, but I feel like our culture caters to the very tiny sliver that doesn't want to talk about the person, because that's what most people say. They say, I don't want to remind them of their pain, because God forbid they get upset at that, right? But I would say, in my experience, encountering hundreds of people who've lost people, the vast majority really desperately want to talk about that person. And I think that the tiny sliver minority that doesn't want to talk about them, I think, in my opinion, it's not so terrible if you do and they tell you, actually, I don't want to talk about that person right now. I don't think you've done a terrible, grievous, crime to that person in grief by, quote unquote, reminding them of their loss. They haven't forgotten. Nobody's forgotten their loss, right? That's not real. I don't ever forget that Ruby and Hart were killed. That doesn't make any sense. So maybe I don't want to. No, I always want to talk about them. Maybe somebody else doesn't want to talk about someone they lost. I think it's okay to make that mistake, as opposed to abandoning all the rest of us who desperately want to talk about them. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. But let me ask you then, why do you believe that society, at least in the West here, where we're in, that is the case, that we've been kind of talked to and taught, even in movies, generally speaking.
Oh, especially in movies. Almost always in movies.
What's very dramatic.
Right, it's dramatic. Don't talk about them. Don't talk about them. I can't.
Right, it's dramatic. It's more dramatic to see someone self-destruct in a corner than to actually open ourselves up. So that's what we have been taught growing up. So is that why you think that we are? I can't blame it all on the movies, but generally speaking, here in the West,
I think there is a big portion of that is the movies and television that show us that, the tougher the person, the more they'll just drink themselves to death and not talk about their loss. And like, that's not so tough. You're running away from your grief, dude.
Yeah, taking the easy way out.
But I think also discomfort. It's uncomfortable to sit with somebody in grief. It's just uncomfortable to talk about loss and think about death. And it's so much easier to be like, oh, they want to be left alone forever.
That makes sense.
Or I'll wait until they reach out to me. And it's like, no, you just reach out to them. It's okay. It's not gonna, what's the worst that could happen? And I think just because in so many of these grief groups that I've been to, everyone starts talking about the aching and loss and the pain, and then very quickly the conversation shifts to how they've been abandoned by their friends and family. Every time.
Really,
Every
really.
time. Yep. And there's so much bitterness and anger and confusion, and it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking because I feel like it's just a cultural miscommunication that people want to help people in loss, but we've got these like expectations that, you know, everybody grieves in their own way, so let's leave them alone to figure it out for themselves, as opposed to we grieve in community, and death is makes people feel very lonely, and let's reach out and be with them in these moments as opposed to walking away from people in grief.
Have you, by any chance, kind of looked into how other cultures deal with grief in your writings and your studies?
Yeah, I haven't done enough research, although a woman just talked to me just recently about a practice in a West African country, a West African Muslim country. I don't want to say the wrong one because then I'm just ignorant. But it was so striking. She said that in this community where she grew up, if somebody dies, the whole community like camps out at that person's house. It's like Shiva on steroids.
Right.
They bring mattresses and sleep around to surround the person for a month. They're just
Oh,
like, yep, we're gonna live over at their house now because they just lost somebody dear to them.
they need
And it's like,
help.
oh my God, that's so beautiful and amazing. Um, so I don't know. I think there's a lot of great cultural models out there for to be grief supportive that we need to look into.
That is beautiful. I mean, I can only
Yeah.
imagine having, 300 people move into the backyard.
Right, right. It sounds bad, I guess, but it's good. But it would never really work in America. People be like, no. Um,
it's
but
it's interesting. Let me ask you, because I mean, you are a writer, and you are, you deal with humor a lot. You use humor a lot. How important is humor during the grieving process?
yeah, for me, it remains helpful. You know, Ruby and Hart were funny people. They enjoyed good jokes, and I talked about that in my book. Like Ruby was such a character. She created this alternate character called Sven, and he was this very obnoxious Russian rug dealer who was always threatening his clients. Sometimes when you call up Ruby, Sven would answer the phone and like threaten you over the phone with attack llamas and things. Like, can you please put Ruby on the phone? But no, she'd be Sven. Um,
That's amazing.
and she created an elaborate website. You can actually look up Sven's rugs just as a joke. It must have taken her hours. It's this amazing, hilarious website with all these different pages of different rugs for sale. It's ridiculous for $1
That's
million.
amazing.
One's called Ugly Rug. um, but and Hart loved jokes that were like risque jokes.
Sure.
He loved to be inappropriate in a wonderful way, in a funny way. So humor was always part of our family. And my wife is a comedy writer. She's written for sitcoms for over 20 years. So she's very funny.
Hmm.
So uh, yeah, so humor was always a part of our family. So it feels like we honor Ruby and Hart when we make jokes, dark jokes around death and grieving. Um, but it just helps me. It helps me, I guess, to navigate it. Yeah.
How do you, and this is a tough line to walk as well. How do you advise other people around the grieving person to use humor? Because I
Ah,
remember it was
yes.
like, there was one, I don't know if you know who Joey Diaz is. He's a stand-up comic,
No.
very famous stand-up comic, but he's the guy. He's like, anytime there's a loss with one of his friends, he would call him up like a day later and just give him the most ridiculous, crass,
Huh.
inappropriate joke about, like, so what did they leave you in the will? Like, things like that.
Right.
And they always said, man, thank you for that. Thank you so, because no one has the balls
Right.
to do that, to just call up
Yeah.
the next day. So
Yeah. Well, I don't know if I
that's
can just
he's a rough
wholeheartedly.
character. He's a rough
Yeah.
character.
He's probably got friends who appreciate that, right? That's the thing.
Exactly. Yeah, that's not a joke.
But
But for other people around,
yeah,
normal people.
well, there's this beautiful tradition around Shiva. So Shiva, for those who don't know, like I sort of mentioned it earlier, that for the first week after the funeral, every night people come to your house and they sit with you, and there are a bunch of rules around how you're supposed to behave, which are very interesting. And one of them is you're not supposed to speak to the griever until they've spoken to you. So, and that for me is like you take your cue from them. So if they greet you and they're weeping, don't tell them a joke, right? No.
Timing. It's all timing.
Yeah. Yeah, like take in where they are, right? Read the room. Basically what it's telling you. Read the room before step into a house of mourning and read the room.
Right.
And so and if the griever is laughing, because we do, we go up and down, right? We cry, we laugh, it's complicated and it changes moment to moment. And so take your cue from the mourner. That's what I would say. So I imagine this comic knows his friends and knows his friends.
Oh yeah,
like
these are other
Dark Humor.
big
Right.
star, other big stars
Right.
and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. So and as a comic, I'm sure he's very good at reading the room, and
Yeah.
he could tell right away. He picks up the phone and calls them, and just hearing their voice on the other line is going to tell him where they're at. But so that's what I would say. Read the room and follow the lead of the griever. And if they want to make dark jokes, then do it. Enter with them. And if they want to weep, weep. If they want to just be silent, then just sit with them in silence. Yeah.
The Jewish tradition of these rituals seem to be very, very powerful, and very like the concept of someone in ancient times said, read the room. We got to put something in here,
Right.
because some of these guys are idiots. We got to
Yeah.
really set some rules here.
You got to help these people. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's pretty
powerful.
amazing. Like there's like a strange one that I thought was the strangest one, said, don't see live music for the first month after someone's died. So the first month is called Shloshim, which means 30, the first 30 days after the death. And I was like, don't see live music, whatever. And then I went to see a play. I went to see a play in honor of Ruby, because she would have loved this play. It was about, Ruby was gay, and this play was about a lesbian theater artist in the time of Nazi Germany. And so it was just like perfect. She would have loved this play. But I went within those first 30 days, and seeing live people on stage, like being exuberantly alive, was too painful. It hurt to see people so full of life. And I was like, oh, that's what that rule is about. That's what the don't see live music is. It's like, it's too full of life, and I wasn't ready. I needed a little more time. So it's just like a piece of ancient wisdom that was like, oh, shoot, I should have listened. I should have waited another week. It would have been better. It was hard. It was really hard to see these people. Because you young actors on stage, emoting about life and death, and it's just like, I'm not ready. I'm not ready yet. It's too early for me.
Any other those little pieces of ancient wisdom that you can think of? Because these are gold nuggets here, man. These are amazing.
Right?
Who would have thought? Don't see live music or a live play, or arguably don't even go see a movie at a theater. Like it's too much life. There's an energy that art gives.
Right. Yeah. I mean, this is a rough one, but so the actual burial. So the Jewish tradition is that the central mourners, in this case, Gail and I, we throw the first handfuls of dirt on the casket. So we literally are burying our children with our bare hands, and then we sit and watch as the rest of our community picks up shovels and finishes the job. So we literally watch our community bury our children. And it felt like that's like punishing, right? Like, why would you do that? Like, give these people a break. But actually, it helps because of denial, It's so hard to accept the reality. It's so hard. And that was helpful it was painful, but helpful. Like, yes, now I see that friend throwing dirt on Ruby and Hart's coffin. Now I see that kid doing it. And it's like, it just helps to deal with denial because it's so powerful in the early days. It's so hard to believe it's real.
Right, exactly. And it's not as brutal as having them say, you do it all.
Right. You don't do the whole thing. Right.
You do the whole thing yourself. Like, it's just
Right.
enough.
Mm-hmm.
It's just enough to really send the signal to the brain.
Yeah.
That's rough, but it's needed. This is not supposed to be cotton candy and rainbows and butterflies.
Yeah. We have to feel the pain. If you feel the love, you're going to feel the pain. That's the flip side of love is grief. And we all, as you said, we all experience it. We're all going to grieve.
Now, Colin, let me ask you, what is the most significant piece of advice or message of hope that you can give to somebody who is going through grief like you have?
Well, the hope, I guess the hope is that it does change. Our relationship to the pain changes. In early grief, it's so awful and so full of despair, and nausea, and it's so overwhelming, and it can feel like this will never change because Ruby and Hart will be dead forever, so it'll never go away. I'll always feel this awful. And I found it's 4 years now, so the anniversary was the 12th, just a couple of days ago, and then the burial we buried them on Father's Day. So yesterday was Father's Day. So 4 years ago, I buried my children, and it's changed. I'm in a very different place than I was. I still ache for them every day, but the aching is not so scary. The pain is not so scary. It's sort of like it's more welcome. Because it's my connection to them is the love and the pain intertwined, maybe is how I think of it. And so that's the message of hope that I give, is that, it's hard to believe. It's hard to believe when you're in acute grief that it'll ever change, but it does. Definitely becomes more bearable. And then the other piece of advice is don't be afraid of the pain. I was scared to start weeping, because I felt like I would never stop. If I started weeping, I would literally never stop and I would lose my mind. That's what it felt like. And I discovered from weeping over and over that that's not how it works. It ebbs and flows, and you sort of ride things out, and things change over time as you process. If you're not afraid of the grief, if you allow yourself to process it, your relationship to it changes. I think if you put it in a box, then your relationship doesn't change to it, and you're kind of freezing it in time,
which is much more painful.
I think ultimately, yes, I think it is.
You have to. If you're at the end of the day, you're going to deal with it one way or another.
Yeah,
it's not going away. It
right.
is a dragon that you have to deal with, and I love your approach to this, because it's.
Oh, thank you.
You're not fighting the dragon, you're dancing with him.
That's a beautiful idea. Yeah.
In a sense, because you're not fighting with him anymore.
Right.
You are part of my life now, and I'm going to dance with you during this process, as opposed to putting him in, well, thanks, but putting him in a closet, and just, God, if he gets out, oh God, right. and living with that, it's just compounding what you've dealt with. So I hope that people listening to this and watching this use you and use your journey as an example of how you could deal with this and how we could deal with this, because it's something we're all of us are going to have to deal with at different levels here and there throughout our life. It's just part of why we're here. It's something that everyone goes through. Everyone. Yeah. Now, where can people pick up your amazing book and find out more about what you're doing?
I have a book too. Nice. So you can buy my book at any bookstore, or online, any bookstore that your favorite local bookstore can order it for you, or maybe they have it in stock. Hopefully they have it in stock. But you can find out more information about it at ColinCampbellAuthor.com. That's where the book is there, and links to buy it. And you can also follow me on Instagram at Colin Writer. Well, Colin Campbell Writer, sorry, Colin Campbell Writer, and ColinCampbellAuthor.com. Yeah.
And where, if anybody wants to make a donation to the Ruby and Heart Foundation, where can they go?
Thank you. Yes. Well, you can Google the Ruby and Heart Foundation, and it'll pop up. Yeah. There's only
but it's
one.
on your website. But there's on your websites as well, or no?
It's on my wife's website, and I think it's on mine, but I don't. It will be soon. Yes.
Okay, but we can find it. We can find it easily through the master that is Google.
Exactly, the Ruby and Heart Foundation. Yep.
And Colin, do you have any parting words for the audience?
Well, thank you for listening. That's my parting words. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate people, reading my book and thinking about Ruby and Heart and thinking about their own grief.
My friend, I appreciate this conversation more than you can imagine, and I really, truly hope it helps people around the world deal with their grief. So I appreciate you and what you're doing for the planet, my friend. Thank you again.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thanks for watching. Click on one of the videos below to continue your journey, and don't forget to subscribe.